All right, so I will formally begin it now. All right, welcome everybody to the August 19th meeting of the WBAI Town Hall Assembly. My name is Jim Dingman, and I'm joined here with Michael D.D. White. We are both members of the local station board. I am also a director on the Pacifica National Board. I've been there for 2 years, quite an experience. And today we're going to be dealing with the financial crisis. Michael, do you want to say a few words?
I don't know if I'll say that we do have a financial crisis. I'll say that radio in general is having a crisis, but it's up to us to solve it in a Pacifica way. And the financial crisis is inextricably tied to the decline in listeners. And that is raises questions about the attractiveness of our content and our ability to promote it and draw people in and create a commitment and don't supporting public from that.
All right, very good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my presentation. I believe that Bertolt Rivers will join us later. I'm going to divide my presentation. Of course, we're going to have everybody have an opportunity to talk about their ideas about how to solve these problems. But I first wanted to deal with the big picture, the big national picture about radio in general, and also policy, because that does affect how we are operating right now. Now, at the big picture, we have, and this is I would argue, as a structural weakness of Pacifica, we don't have any involvement to little involvement when any lobbying about communications issues down in Washington. So, for example, and this probably was something would be very difficult for us to overcome, but people will know that Gigi Son was to be the third Democratic Party elected representatives on the FCC. She's somebody who has a very strong tradition of encouraging community radio, internet neutrality, et cetera. And she was basically hounded by the Republicans and prevented from taking on the issue of coming on to be the FCC commissioner. So she withdrew her formal request. Now, she's also been replaced as a candidate by Anna Gomez, but she's also receiving outright consistent attacks by the Republicans as to having her be able to replace. So it's unlikely that there will be a third commissioner on the FCC. Hence, a lot of issues that affect us, that is, they were talking about even expanding lower power FM. They were talking about actually creating another non-educational NEC channel that has been essentially sidelined. Now, another factor coming in is that, we have this push to eliminate FM and AM radio from cars. This has been going on now for a year, and it reached a sort of a cacophony when Senator Markey of Massachusetts was entering the fray. And we have a serious problem with AM and FM radio, drive time radio, being eliminated or essentially sidelined from being heard in cars. So keep that in mind. There's another pressure at a macro level affecting our listenership. Now, another problem is the question of the change of habits of people listening. As you can see, this is a poll done in 2021 about streaming. Streaming has increased as a result of the COVID crisis. So in general, there is more streaming going on than before, and less people are listening to analog radio. And in particular, younger people below 44 to 18 are not listening to analog radio the same way they did. And here you have statistics here about how many people listen to music via radio. As you can see, it's slanted to the baby boomer market mainly, which is another problem we have. It's a strength and weakness, but most of our listeners are over 65 in all the stations, especially in New York. Now, another aspect that we have not exploited nationally is the general trends to creating all these different extra wireless sound gizmos, echo and all that. And there's a real problem in the sense that we are not effectively integrating ourselves into modern technology. Some listeners I know have 2 or 3 of these kind of systems in their house, but this is not something effectively marketed by Pacifica. Now, let's go into some of the aspects that affect the station in particular. And in particular, what we can say about some of the national trends that are important to see. Now, this is a fact based, essentially, NPR stations and community radio stations. This is done by Pew every year. And what you're seeing here is the amount of revenue has gone up consistently from 2015 to 2022 for all the NPR and PRX stations. This, again, we cannot compare completely our situation with that, but it's important to keep in mind that there's one statistic here that's particularly dramatic, and that is the amount of listeners that have gone up. Revenue has gone up for public radio quite significantly, and individual giving is down to some extent compared to what it was. But notice basically individual giving is pretty high. It was affected by the pandemic, and underwriting, which we do not have any little to no money coming in that source. That's lower in general for for public media in general to the United States. But keep in mind this rising trend. Now, let me turn to local station radio membership, and you'll see why I'm showing this in a minute. These are the trends nationally. It's actually going up in terms of national radio membership, public radio membership. Community radio, I talked to the NFCB and to other people, and it's all over the place. There's no template for basically understanding community radio. Some community radio finance structures are far weaker than ours. What I'm concentrating on is the revenue streams. Now, what I'm going to share here is some data we've been doing at the national level. We've been doing developing a strategic plan. And it's, of course, very difficult to do when we have one financial crisis after the next. But these are general trends around the United States. And again, I'm going to bore into Pacifica in the next minute or two. The amount of people listening to radio in general in the United States has declined from 2020 to 2023. People were expecting a bounce back after the pandemic was officially announced over. But as you can see, this, by the way, is the Radio Research Consortium. These are the people we get the Nielsen data on. All the markets have continued to decline in terms of radio listenership. I'm talking about in general, not just Pacifica. So here you have in San Francisco, the amount of people listening on average quarterly hours down 50%. And you have all these other factors here: Washington, Los Angeles, Houston, New York, minus 41%. Now, what's important about this time spent listening factor is that generally when I've looked at these Arbitron numbers and metrics for New York City for several decades now, and if someone is spending a lot of time listening to a station, time spent listening is what you want. You want them to be listening to stations because then that person will turn into a subscriber. As you can see, nationwide, time spent listening has declined in all the markets nationally. We're talking about everywhere in the country. So that's another structural problem that we have to face. Now, let's talk about Pacifica in general. Now, I would argue that, and this is particularly controversial, but I would argue that our audience in reality has declined 75% from 1999 throughout the entire system. I think the numbers could be even more dramatic than that. I think we could have had a 90% decline in audience. Now, the reason I say that is that when we got the Nielsen ratings for different stations, they have been more or less at a plateau of at the most 100,000 people a week tuning in. And the reason we know that these numbers bear a relationship to revenue is that when we have large amounts of people listening to us, we have a lot more revenue, because most of our revenue, 80% of our revenue plus revenue, in some cases 90%, comes in from listener member donors. Now, I would estimate the amount of people listening to the station in New York in reality is somewhere between 21 to 40,000 people a week. I would estimate the amount of people listening to the station in Los Angeles is between 26 and 40,000 a week. In San Francisco, it's between 40 to 80,000 a week. In Houston, they've actually increased their audience. They've actually been able to bounce and raise their audience to about 50 to 80,000. But again, this is all imprecise. I am just simply giving you guesstimates based on my knowledge about the cumes in general historically. I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. And in Washington, which also has the highest amount of weekly cume of any of our stations, 0.8% of the market share, their numbers are anywhere from 50 to 70,000. Now, another statistic, and that's why I showed you that number about how many listener members have gone up in let's say NPR stations. Let's contrast this to Pacifica. Now, these are numbers based on the NES statistics from various years. And what I did was I went through all the NES studies, because remember, they have to actually add and accumulate the amount of people we have in terms of listener members. We had approximately 100,000 listener members in 2004. We now only have 30,000. So that means that the amount of people actually subscribing has declined about 70%. Okay. And you can tie that in with the other questions of the issue of what is going on with, the macro issues I talked about that are structurally affecting radio, because analog radio is a situation where it has to be dealing with the fragmentation of the media market, given the imposition of the internet, digital broadcasting. We've had the third, fourth, and now they're talking about the fifth industrial revolutions coming into play in the past 25 to 30 years. And Pacifica has been behind the 8 ball on all that stuff. Now, let's look at the structure of a general public media radio station. Most of their only about 40% of their revenue stream comes in from listener membership. In the case of all the stations, it's easily or above. And someone's going to have to mute Darren. Okay, I'm going to mute you. Corporate underwriting. This is, of course, we did pass a motion to take underwriting. Obviously, it doesn't mean we're going to take underwriting from Exxon or Lockheed Martin, but that number of 20% is way, I would say we're lucky if it's 1% right now. We do not have a diverse income stream. In terms of private donors, the way the CPB and public media define a private donor, it's somebody who gives $1,000 or more annually. So all the stations have numbers in there, the buddy system. There's all sorts of numbers that you can see that rate those numbers is pretty high. New York has Berthold is on the phone, so he'll talk in a minute about the situation here more granularly in New York. But we all have numbers of these people in our midst. It just is that they're not. In some cases, by the way, some stations get a lot of private donors in this category. The station in Berkeley has a high percentage. But all these stations have local characteristics that are unique to their markets that have nothing to do with each other in terms of, the interrelationship of that. Now, another major weakness is foundation money. We've constantly argued about this. We would get, I would say, about 0.2 to 0.3% at this point if you add both local and national foundation money together. That's how much money we get. We get a very insignificant amount. We don't get foundation money. And when it comes to CPB, we know we don't get any CPB money at all. And that, in the past, at one point, it was $1.6 million a year or $1.3 million a year. So that, of course, has been a problem. And other sources, we get money from bequests, which is great. But as you can see, you cannot plan a diverse operation simply based on bequests. It's great money to get, but it's not particularly sustainable. Now, what I'm going to show you here is the general numbers for Pacifica This is based on the consolidated income report that we just got. And remember, just contrast that with what I showed you just earlier. So about 74% of our money comes in from listener members in general, but in some cases it's much higher. New York, I think, is about 86 to 90%. And our numbers, even though we're getting this PSA money, which is great, Bertold can talk about that in a few minutes. And then the question of website income, that's interesting. I didn't realize that this, by the way, based on the consolidated report. They show that there's a website income. Interesting, car donations is significant in Los Angeles, obviously, because it's car country out there. They get about 4% of their revenue. So car donations is an issue that might be interesting to exploit here in New York more. But sponsorships and underwriting, forget about it. We're off the radar screen in terms of any comparable situation with another community radio station. Our affiliates, most of them get underwriting. So I know it's controversial, but the board did pass this, and it's up to us to implement it. In terms of another issue raised all the time is subcarrier frequency income. We used to get at least $500,000 a year, probably more. New York, I believe, at one point was generating several $100,000 a year in SCA income. That is insignificant at this point. Subcarrier frequency income is about $120,000 a year. It's an obsolete technology, and it's not essentially an important part of any kind of plan to get out of our doldrums here. And grant income, as you can see, is pretty insignificant. Most of this grant income is out in the West Coast. The Berkeley station gets $90,000 a year. They got a 3-year grant, which equaled $270,000. And what that was used for was training their staff locally. That was not touched when the Vernil raid on the income on the accounts was done. But that just shows you that, again, that's a pretty low number in general. And again, one that we need to create. Now, I'm not going to go into all these affiliates. And also, I'm not going to get further into some of these issues of how we want to do. Now, let me conclude by talking about some of the ideas that have come up here locally that have to do with solving the problems here. And again, we're in a situation where I have to be blunt. We could face a situation in the near future similar to what happened in 2019, except it will be less vicious, but the same effect will happen. We could be shut down, and we could be turned into a repeater station. I think that's the worst case scenario, but that is a distinct possibility given some of the trends we see in the national level. Now, we have several mechanisms that deal with the fundraising issue. There's the LOFT task force. You can see their meeting schedule going to kptfx.org. And again, it's a frustrating, hard job to get these kind of processes in motion. Hopefully now, with this crisis on our heads, everybody's going to put aside all their partisan differences, and we'll just roll up our sleeves and work on the task at hand. Now, the LSB passed a motion to set up various task forces, which haven't really been populated, but one of them has to do with premiums. So this task force is to generate new premiums, at least 3 new ones a month. Again, I can argue about, what I think about all these different things, but these are tasks to focus in on right now to help us getting out of the financial situation. Another task force is to basically help the PSA effort to raise current revenue from $80,000 to $300,000 annually from the PSAs, which is possible. Again, PSAs in a way are a form of underwriting, but nevertheless, that's one of the objectives of this. There's obviously, thanks to Linda and Bertold, they've been able to, generate close to $100,000 in revenue from this source. But the issue is to further diversify this income stream. Another one is to get the underwriting operation in gear. That was achieved after several years of battling away at the national level. Alex Steinberg deserves thanks for pushing this, and that's where we're at on that. That's another income stream that is undeveloped, that needs to be developed. People have to go out and get that, sell the station and all that. Now, there's another task also important that can bring in revenue immediately, and that's to work on the outstanding pledges, lapsed donors, renew membership. That requires one-on-one phone calls to dozens and dozens of people. A lot of us have done this in the past. It is easily a short way to one, create goodwill, and two, basically start to generate some additional income that's needed. And finally, the issue of publicity and rebranding, very important. The PNB passed a motion about 6 or 7 months ago that each station can create PR rebranding promotion committees. Now, there's historically been the lack of investment in public relations in the whole system. And that's a problem in general. And let's compare it to Democracy Now. Democracy Now invests about 5% of their gross revenue into publicity. I would say that that number is not comparably made anywhere in the system in any station. Of course, there's publicity goes on in some way, but we don't have a conscious effort to rebrand or shake the stereotypes and negative opinions that people have about Pacifica and WBAI in our metro areas. So this is to specifically handle that question. So on that note, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to ask if Bertold will want to share his comments about this question. Bertold, are you there? You can unmute Bertold.
Hey, Jim.
Thank you, Bertold.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to focus on BAI and not on the national office. I don't understand. I don't get those numbers nationally, but locally, the revenue coming from premium pitch, the percentage I think is a lot higher at WBAI. I mean, I have the numbers. I can give them to you. Even though the premium costs us, I mean, we try to 1 to 10. It's probably 2 to 10 cost average. But since most of our money comes from the premium pitch, I think the 1.5% is very low. I think that's a assignment of, accounts. I think the most pressing and the most interesting and important things that we can do right now is to focus on getting new premium and then on identifying public service announcements. And these are very low. Linda and I, we went and got those things, the PSAs. It's not like we knew what we were doing. I mean, we've been going at it for 7 years with Andrea Cass and them, who just never could implement anything. But we didn't really have in the business or connections or anything like that. So when the national office made it available for us to do, we kind of reach out and then, hard work, luck, and everything else. And then we got all these PSAs, like $80,000 to $100,000. So these are easy. It's easy because everybody can contribute to this. People can listen to all other stations, listen to the PSAs they're putting out there, write down the PSAs and which company or state or city office sponsors those PSAs, the ones that are compatible to BAI and Pacifica mission, the things that we would accept, and make a list. Research the list, research the contact, reach out to those people, and get Bertold and Linda to make the argument for them to have the PSAs. I'll give you an example. So you would think that it's impossible to get PSAs on BAI because we don't have enough people listening whatsoever. Department of Health reached out to us, and then we reached out to them. We started talking, and we are at an impasse. And I told them, I said, listen, we have the most anti-vaccine, distrustful group of people that listen to the station. And therefore, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you can hear you, Ben. Don't worry about it.
Loud and clear, Bertold, loud and clear.
Okay. And therefore, when you're doing marketing, you're supposed to be targeting us, our listenership. I'll convince the listenership who do not believe in vaccine that they should get vaccinated. So, and then they say, oh, that's a good argument. And then we have, I don't know, $40,000-$50,000 worth of PSAs from the Department of Health from October to present. Now we are in a vacation or time off, so we're not getting anything. I mean, we always get worried because it's not something where you sign a contract for a year. It's like every time they have a campaign, they come to you and they say, we have one more. And it's the same thing for transportation and the Department of Education. I mean, we do things for them for free. And, to show them that they're going to get a big bang for their money, even though we may not have a large listenership, but they're going to get a lot of exposure. And then we can make money. I think we can get $300,000. I mean, Linda and I, we stopped reaching out to them because it was so much work to manage those three. So that's an easy one for everyone to collaborate and participate and put together a list, and then started researching the contact people and all that stuff and how to reach out to them. Now, the first one, the most important one is premium. People accuse me of being anti-producers, anti-this, anti-that. But the bottom line is our producers do not give us premium, period. We get Gary North, Kristen Basil, Tony Bates, Corinne Frenary, Catherine Davis, Mimi Rosenberg. I may have missed one or two, or Dr. Kokai. And that's it. We don't get anything else. So we keep on rehashing them, Tony Bates, rehashing the same premium. So we get diminishing return. You have 40 or 100,000 people are listening to the same thing. And then, you get a percentage of people who are going to buy them or get them. Then after that, if you play it again, the people remaining, the chances of them getting it is reduced. When we have new premium, I know when we have a new premium, we make money. If sometimes we have good new premium, we make a lot of money. We have okay new premium, we make some money, more than when we replay the premium. So the bottom line is, if we can generate 2 new premiums a month, and save you the hassle of having to deal with listening to us replaying the same pitch again over and over, I get sick of them. I'm sure you get sick of them. That would change everything at WBAI. That would increase our revenue by like 20% or more. That would bring us back to about $80,000 to $100,000 a month in revenue. And so therefore the premiums that the PSAs now would be extra money that we can pay essential service or whatever. So these 2 items are essential. And the third most important item is, the one-on-one contact with the listeners, calling them and saying, hello, hi, I noticed that you no longer remember. Can you become a BI buddy for $10 a month? Like for those people who are really reluctant because they have a problem with us, or everybody has a problem with us, we have 50% of our listeners who are disgusted by our anti-vaccine stance. And then we have another 50%, the other 50% who are disgusted with the opposite, or pro-vaccine stance. So, we always get people who have issues with whatever we do. So the idea is to reach out to those people and explain to them that this is free speech, and then this is exactly why they support us. So between $15 and $25 a month, you get them back as BI buddy, not as a one-time donation, and that would make a huge difference in our life. That would change everything. That's it. That would change everything.
All right, Michael.
So the PSAs we've been very successful at. The one thing I want to say about everything that you guys are saying is that I have a critic of national office board members, the whole Pacifica family, are so narrow-minded in trying to cut. Talk about consulting at WBAI and all of that stuff. If I get rid of all my consultants completely, we have reduced expenses per month by $5,000, okay? And then so $5,000, okay? $5,000 out of a $25,000 or $30,000 deficit a month is ridiculous. It doesn't do anything. We have to increase our revenue, and that's what we should focus on. That's my first thing. Even if we were to get rid of all, of all employees paid, like, and their dream is to get rid of me and whatever, get rid of all the employees paid, that would be like, I don't know, $30,000 a month, and then you have nothing going on at the station. So we'll just barely break even. So I mean, this idea of cut is narrow-minded, short-sighted, no imagination. And I'm saying that to all those people at the national office or national board, and then to our Pacifica that keep on focusing on that. There's nothing else to cut. Second, it is almost malpractice that we are still not talking about podcasts. You just mentioned all these internet services, podcasts, and all of these things, internet programming that are chipping away at what the people who used to listen to it. The same way we spend all that energy raising all this money on this election. You don't want to know how I feel about that. We could spend that same amount of energy to raise that kind of money to build a podcast and actually to launch a national podcast at Pacifica.org. That's all I have to say. I mean, we've been talking about this forever. I mean, it's like analysis paralysis. It's ridiculous that we don't have, a real decent podcast program going on at Pacifica, and where we could have gotten a lot of listeners and generating a lot of money. I'm done.
You're done. Okay, Michael, do you have any question for Berthold before we start to take questions from the floor? Michael?
I don't think I have a specific question, but I'm going to note that there's something being offered in the chat that the WBAI, as one of the stations in the Pacifica network, should have plans in order to increase revenues and I guess the person in the chat is suggesting that these plans be codified in a at a particular moment and then put on the web. I think we've been discussing the plans. The overall picture is that we need to increase listenership, and we need to increase listenership in accordance with our mission. At a time when there's a flight away from terrestrial radio and into the internet. But what we're hearing from Berthold is the very active plans, and in fact, they're being refined. So to write them up today would, you'd find them refined a little bit further tomorrow. But
Michael,
we should open this up to the
Hold on, Jeff. Hold on,
to
Jeff.
people, and if people want to speak next, it helps if people raise their hand to be recognized. And so you can raise your hand in Zoom. If you're participating by phone, *9 will show your hand raised. If you don't know how to do that, it is also possible to just say something at an appropriate moment, and we'll hear you. So I see that Jack DePalma and Adrian Mizels and David Sultan, in that order, have raised their hands. Jim, do you want to take some of them?
Yeah, hold on a second. We also have the other member of the committee on the phone here, Eleanor Foreman. Eleanor, do you want to unmute and whatever comments you want to make before we start to take comments or questions, Eleanor, on these issues about money? Go on, Eleanor.
Hi.
Thank you.
You could talk with him, dear.
Jack, please let her speak. Go on.
I apologize.
No, I'm fine with having the people who have their hands raised speak first.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jack, go on, Jack.
Yeah, Jim, I like to make notes about what's going on. First, let's start with the chat. The concern about what's in the internet posting at WBAI is a matter of getting a web person to update the plans. We've always had issues with updating things because that requires immediate attention to a website, which is not what the radio station does. So to the person that's asking who I am, my name is Jack DePalma. I'm on the LSB now. I've listened to WBAI over 55 years. I work to volunteer to help the station if I can, doing what I can. Now, Jim, 1, 2, 3 with you. What you said about radios and cars, I think is more driven by economic factors, not about the fact that the statistic shows that people aren't listening to radios. They took the CD player out of my car and I wondered what was going on. And then that whole thing kind of started happening. Number two, what Bertol is saying is really relevant. I know that we've kind of cut and cut and cut, and I know that we can't cut to increase our listenership or increase our sponsorship. That's a big problem, and Bertol is absolutely right about that. We have to draw in more listeners. We have to draw in more listeners that are willing to take $1 or $2 out of their pocket and support a radio station. And that may be a bigger issue than we're dealing with in the bigger picture, because it's happening network wide. It's happening on many networks, and it's happening across the board for a variety of reasons. I think cell phones are a big factor. I think the fact that people are more interested in designing or steering themselves to where the content is what they agree with, as opposed to listening to something that somebody else curates. And I think the third thing that Bertol said, which is the fact that we, and as Jim is saying as well, we're really not only scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of what we can do to raise money. We have to be creative. We have to remember that the listener is really the person that puts the dollar in our hand. And that's a real important thing. Podcasts are real important. And if the network doesn't come along, I know Bertol has initiated this, and we've tried to do what we can in New York City. So I think that the problems are durable, longstanding, pretty obvious, but we have to try what we can try and not just, try to cut everything back to where there's no money spent. Therefore, we have nothing to reach out to because we have spent no money. Our content, I think, is usually good. Sometimes I hear stuff on WBAI that I say, why don't some people, reach in? And because I think a lot of reasons why is because people don't have any assets. And a lot of people are really focused on, working as opposed to, entertainment or enjoyment or listening, and social content does motivate me, but not everybody's motivated like me. So thank you, Jim. And thank you very much, Bertol. I think we have to be creative. I think we have to get more listeners with support. I think the people that listen to our radio station are intelligent. They know what to turn on. They know what to turn off. And I think that's a bigger conversation than we're having. So thanks for the town hall, and the person in the chat. It's really interesting that they worry about the website, not the radio station. Thank you.
All right. Let me quickly just add something, and Bertold can add something too. I was looking at our Arbitron studies from the 1990s and the early 2000s. And one thing jumped out at me, the number of people listening to WBAI in their cars. I know that you listen to WBAI in your car, Jack, because I've been in your car. Same with Bertold. However, the amount of people listening to the radio station in general, in all the Pacifica stations, I've seen this data for many years, is extremely low in terms of car listenership. And that is where most Americans listen to AM radio, and most Americans listen to FM radio, certainly music when they're driving. So that's something we should think about, how to further penetrate people in their cars. Bertold, do you want to add something to what Jack just said?
I add something to what you just said. You have to correlate that with the statistics of how many people drive to work from New Jersey and New York, as opposed to in the past. People stay at home to work, 2 out of 5 days of the week, 3 out of 5 days of the week, or they don't even go to work at all. So they're not driving. You probably should correlate that with the people driving. I do not have a radio at my house. So when I listen to WBAI at home, I go online, WBAI.org, and press play. So you will not see that statistics going up as people listening to WBAI on the radio. So that's a very big problem. So the question really we should ask ourselves is, are we the radio industry, on route to extinction? Period. And if that is the case, how do we prepare that station to do what it does, which is educate people, and then transition it slowly into a different medium, or have another medium like a podcast as a backup going forward, which is what everybody else has done. Second, concerning the website and stuff like that, my understanding is like $500,000, $300,000 a year is spent at other stations on websites and webmasters and stuff like that. At WBAI, we pay $2,500 a month to one guy who was working probably full time and is like definitely overworked and totally underpaid, because someone like that should be paid like probably close to $120,000 a year. So we are saving money already by getting someone like that to help us out, and it's very difficult to ask him at any point of time and day to update the website on a regular basis. We do the basics, and that's it. We're already being asked to get rid of consultants. He's a consultant, so there are mixed messages here.
Right.
If the network wants, this to be updated up to the minute, then we need to pay this guy more, or we need to pay someone else as an assistant that would do the grunt works, or the daily, hourly, per second grunt works. Linda already is almost unreasonably asking him for too much every day. So
All right.
there you have it.
All right, thank you. Adrian, you can unmute, Adrian.
Jim, could we just note that this is a town hall and is open to everybody to speak? And although it's not a candidates forum, we should recognize that some of the people speaking and coming up to speak are also candidates. So Eleanor Elizabeth Foreman is currently a candidate for the LSB. Jack DePalma, who spoke after her, is a candidate for the LSB. Adrian is, who's about to speak. David Saltman, who's coming up, and Paul DiLorenzo are all candidates. So I think it's just worth noting that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Go on, Adrian.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I have a couple questions and one comment. One is on the podcast. So Berthold said that, he doesn't know why we're not doing podcasts. Is this a financial issue, or is it like a delegation issue? Like, why wouldn't we be doing podcasts? Like, is there somebody who's supposed to be doing it that's not doing it?
Good question. Great question. It's a vision issue. We would need about $150,000 to $200,000 for a real podcast. Right? You would need to hire one or two people that would curate the podcast. The podcast needs to be curated. We have certain things going on in Pacifica that we call so-called podcasts, and there are no criteria for anything else. I spent 3 years studying what a podcast is and should be. I still don't totally understand it. I'll be honest with you. I'm old school. And so I had an intern and then different people. I had a guy called Mike Sargent who is with us a show, was making a high 6-digit in the commercial world, being paid to manage podcasts for a Spanish radio station. They're making a lot of money. So all these people volunteered as experts and stuff like that. I did get a major donor twisted his arm to give us, I don't know, $30,000, seed money to pay my intern to really start curating stuff and things like that. There was just not enough resources, not enough money to put behind that. You need to put some money behind that so that you can launch it until you start raising money. We had 3 or 4 presentations by experts and different people, all those people I told you about, explaining podcasts and things like that. And there just seems to be, vision, initiative, or the will to just say, let's raise 200,000. I mean, they raised how much money for this election, which I'm not sure what's going to do for us as far as money. Why can't we raise $200,000 for the podcast and then hire one? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt for a second? When you say there's not initiative or will, I'm trying to figure out whose will should it be? The LSB, the board, whose will?
I think it should be. I know I will stay away from that. I know I have that will. Will and focus. I would say everybody. Everybody should just say, let's do this. As a network,
who's the everybody though? I'm just trying to sort of figure out the roles. Who's the everybody?
I think upper management, the national board, just like they push this election, and then the local board should just say, let's get this done. And then they should tell the general managers, let's put a committee together, a small committee together of you guys, and then let's just really launch this. Let's find the money. Let's decide on the expert. Let's decide on 2 people to hire, and then let's get it done. Most of the stations have a semi-decent looking website, and I think that the national office, Pacifica.org website is not decent, and I think that's where they should put the podcast. But we do this completely, the website, and then make it a hub where it can take the different podcasts from different stations, and then because what happens when you have all the podcasts in one location, you have more realistic value to attract money, and then I think that's what should be done. I've been talking about this for 7 years, and wasting $30,000 or more dollars from a major donor to pay this intern who quit because she was getting paid sometimes after a while when he stopped donating, she wasn't paid regularly, and then it all died out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think I get overall the gist of it. As far as the task force, I was on that call a week or so ago when the task force were named, and I was curious that it didn't seem to me that there was sort of like a tactical next steps. Are there tactical next steps now as far as getting butts in seats, for lack of a better expression?
Well, the tactical next step, first of all, let me say that, people are talking about a lack of vision, mission, and all that stuff, plan. I've had that for, since I started, 13, 12 years ago. When I came from corporate America, I was excited. I had an executive page and then plan and all that stuff. That has not changed much. What do we need to do? Well, one of them is, we need to have more premium.
Bertold, I think I'm asking a different question. Just before we go down a different road, I'm just asking about the task force from the LSB that were created on the last call. My question was, are there tactical next steps of what by when, or who does what by when? Even as I'm going to reach out to the secretary of the board to give me the name of the people who volunteered for those committees, and then I already have a layout of what to do. I already asked also my webmaster to generate the list of all people who pledged for premium who haven't paid, and then to generate the list of all people who have lapsed their membership. So that should be printed in the middle of next week, the latest, I have like 3 people who have volunteered to make the calls, to reach out to members to ask them to renew their membership or to for the pledge. So we have that going on. And once I get the list, hopefully I'll have a meeting with each one of those committees. Now, for me personally, I'm going to be chairing those 3 committees. The fund.
There are more than 3, right? I mean, Jim and Michael, aren't there more than 3 committees, task force?
There are 5 committees. There are 5 committees.
Okay,
Yeah, but the three committees, the 3 or 4 committees that the 3 committees that I'm definitely going to manage myself are the premium committee for sure, the PSA committee, and then the underwriting committee. You know, I want to push those and get them going. The other committees, other people can.
and I think that's what I'm asking. Are there next steps for that? I mean, I don't have to know what the next steps are. I'm just asking, is there a ball rolling for it? Like there's people who, okay, great.
Yeah, in the middle of next week, definitely, I've already created some folders where I'm putting the step by step on how to get premiums, a list of premiums that we have generated over the years, you know, a letter that tells you how to send a letter to publishers and things like that.
Right.
Of a guest we had on the air to ask them to be a guest on the show and to figure out, you know, what discount they can give us on premiums. I have all of that already in one subfolder.
Right. Awesome.
Just waiting for other people to come in so that I can give them the instruction and we have that discussion. Right. And then you know, the list also of publications. There's a lot of publications, like a bookstore that give you the list of their books and stuff like that. They need to go and peruse to those and then look at what they think is important. One of the rules of the premium gathering committee is that no one criticizes anyone's choices of premium. I am going to be collecting premiums found and generated by everyone on that committee, because anytime you allow anybody to criticize what type of premium is being bought in that committee, then that will destroy the committee. So that was the only hard rule. So I have this thing all set, all lined up.
All right, Bert,
May I chime in on the subject of podcasts?
You're going, Michael.
So I want to say that we have the WBAI archives, and they function something like a podcast. So through the archives, you can take any show's previous broadcast, and you can have a link that will allow people to find it, listen to it, download it, etc. What would make it more similar? The archives are clunky; they're slow to load. So
yeah,
that's great. But one thing that would make the archives closer to a podcast is if the producers who are responsible for doing so filled in their program information and made it therefore easier Googleable, and you could tell by reviewing the archives which shows you wanted to listen to. In the background, we have quite a few different show producers that have their own podcasts and their own websites, and they have all of the information that they don't fill into the WBAI website filled in on their websites. Furthermore, if you wanted to take any show and make it more accessible, you could take all of the individual program links and you could set it up on a page that would act as a internet skin that would be easily accessible, wouldn't be slow to load, wouldn't be clunky, and would have a direct link to all of the individual shows. So in that respect, we have time shifting available, and it's similar to a podcast, but it's not as it's not where everyone is in the industry, and that's partly because we have a lot of producers who are sort of shifting the gravity away from WBAI and Pacifica with their own sites.
All right, let me just jump in here, Adrian. The issue of podcasting has been a sore subject for at least 10 to 12 years, and it has to be completely rethought and re-energized. One, I've gone to many podcast events since 2007, 2008. And one of the things that's necessary is that Pacifica make a commitment to train people in radio art, pure and simple, because the good podcasts that do well are podcasts that come out of, for example, This American Life had the #1 podcast for a long time based on that true crime incident down there in Maryland. But that's coming out of a highly sophisticated production scheme set up in Chicago when that particular producer actually moved from WBAI to Chicago to enter radio there. So there's a whole thought process and creative process and actual practical process with podcasting that has to be revolutionized throughout the entire network. Finally, the issue of the premiums and everything that Bertel's saying, it's a creative process. We're going to have to change and bob and weave because we got to find what works and sticks. Anyway, enough of that. But thank you for the comments. And yeah, you're right. These are things, getting the butts into the station is the next task. David.
Yeah.
David Saltman. Go on, David.
I have some years ago, I was involved in a fundraising program. I guess you'd call it a premium. I didn't use that word, but for public television. And I think that this idea would be perfectly applicable to WBAI. And it raised a lot of money. I'm talking in the millions of dollars. And it went on for several years. And it was only COVID that brought it to a close. And it could come, it's ready to come back. And it could easily come back on WBAI. So this was, like I say, for public television. And the premium was, the premiums were riverboat cruises. And basically these were, the premium was your family vacation. And I'm not all that familiar with the terrain, the current terrain on WBAI. I know a lot more about it from back in the 60s and 70s, but here's an example. I know that Gary Null is one of the big audience, has maybe the biggest audience on the station. Gary Null does a Hudson River cruise of the Hudson River food world. And he goes to all the great restaurants up and down the Hudson River. And this is sold to his listeners as a vacation package. And there's a very good price on this because the fact that it's for public radio means that it's tax deductible to the buyer. And this was the big selling point. And what we did on public television was we sold them, the cruises were all, how do you put this, localized. So for example, one boat would be all people from Houston, and they would go up and down the Danube. This was all mostly in Europe. And they would stop off at every one of the fabulous eating and drinking places along in the Danube, or in France, in the Touraine. You could do, and there's so many New York-based venues that would be applicable to this. You could do a bookstore tour of New York. I hope there's a book show on. I'm not familiar with it, but if there isn't, there really ought to be. You could do you could do something called, I did a program on this for Sunday morning with Charles Curall, The Ghosts of New York. Go back to all the Damon Runyon haunts in New York City as a tour for families. Anyway, people paid up top dollar for this thing. For them, it was actually a very good price. It was cheaper than a comparable river tour. The riverboat companies were all into it. The tours were already set up. They've taken care of all the, port issues and so on. You can live on the boat. You can get off in, someplace in upstate New York, do a tour of the Dia Art Center, and then go back and sleep on the boat. and then go up to, Burlington, Vermont, and do the Bernie Sanders story or something like that. There's a million ways to cut this. I think you guys get the gist. But I'm just saying, talk about being creative and making a lot of money. It's not that difficult. Well, I'm telling you, we literally raised millions of dollars over a period of some years. And at one year, we ran 16 boats in 1 year. We had, by the way, you should know this just for whoever's going to set this up. We had a team of outside investors who put up the seed money for this under the provisions of the 501c3 laws that allow you to have an income producing business somewhere along the way. So they all got paid back their investment plus 11% interest on their investment. And it funded the so we could put up the money for the boat trips. And the whole thing it went really incredibly smoothly for such a major operation. And I don't know, I'll get the numbers if you want to pursue this, but we ended up, we ran this for a period of 6 or 7 years, and we took thousands and thousands of people, and everybody loved it. The PBS loved it because they got a piece of the action. The local stations loved it because they got a piece of the action. And everybody profited from this. It was a win-win situation. And the audience loved it. Some people came back 2 years, 3 years in a row, whole families. It was a winner. I've said my piece.
Brilliant idea. Brilliant idea.
I would like to follow up with that on that. If you know the people who have the know-how, we can get this going. I just let you know though, like this is not a new idea.
Of course,
Gary Knoll,
everybody does.
Yeah. We used to have Gary Knoll used to do a retreat twice a year, either in Texas in his property or in Florida. Where people went in and exercise and were in nature and then ate.
You've already just named 3 different variations of this: an exercise tour, a food tour. It's a home run.
Yeah, so he is not doing as much of it anymore. And then there was a lot of criticism for WBAI doing this. It was a $2,500 trip because they had to pay for their plane and accommodation. And then WBAI, only collected $500 because the other $2,000 were for accommodation and their plane ticket back and forth and stuff like that. So we also had a kayak tour on the Hudson, with a clean Hudson, that was with Ecologic. That was not that successful. Maybe it's because we didn't know how to advertise it that much. I didn't understand why that wasn't that successful. I wanted to do it.
Not enough food. It's all about the food and drink. Take my word for it. That's what they signed up.
Yeah. So that's these are and we did I did try a trip to Peru. We have the whole site, and then to go on a spiritual trip to Peru, and I have we have a whole website page with all the things. I can share that with you. But we only had 2 people who booked the tour, so we have to give them their money because we needed at least 12 or 15 people to kind of just break even or just make a little money. So all of these things we can do over again. That person who was doing it knew what she was doing. It's just that it didn't take. I don't know, if we know somebody who knows how to do marketing and advertising, I'll send that link to Jim and then he can share it with you. But Jim, I sent you an email that has an attachment that was an introduction of podcast from Hannah Simpson, our intern. You can share it with those people because what Michael was saying, that is still not podcast, Michael. That is an enhanced archive. Podcast is very specific. There are things you have to remove. There is a minimum level of quality of the sound, and so on. she explained some of that in there. It's very complicated. I tell you, I think I'm pretty intelligent, but I can't totally grasp it all the time, and I left it up to them, the new generation, and her and Mike Sargent to really break it down and then apply. Then there is the thing about how do you capitalize on it. There are two ways. There are subscription, and there is download. Or do you do it for free first, so that to build a listenership, and then you turn it into a subscription or download? We wanted to do it so that we could do both, turn on and off the subscription and the download. And then, so that was important for us as a station, as a network, a radio network to be able to have those two capacities to figure out how to do this. And then it died.
All right. Well, we can revisit that. And also thank you. Thank you for your brilliant idea, David. All right, let me go to Paul. Go on, Paul. Unmute Paul. Paul DiRienzo. Paul.
I'm unmuted. Give me a second. Here I am. Hi, guys. So interesting discussion today, and I think I learned a lot about it. Just my comments on what's been said, the whole podcast idea. I think the problem is that it's podcast is a euphemism. When we're talking about podcasts, what we're really talking about is promoting influencers who might be bigger than the station in their popularity in order to bring people. But young people respond to that, and I can just see what happened the other day. An influencer on Twitch, called on his followers to come and get a handful of PlayStations at Washington Square Park, Union Square Park. And I was there. I couldn't believe it. It was like 10,000 people there. And the police were out of, it was all right. It was well behaved. Don't listen to what you heard in the media. It was great. The heaviest thing I saw got thrown was a football, and somebody caught it. And, but, the police were freaked out that people took over the park there and held it for a number of hours. And so that's when you talk about a podcast, what you really mean is an influencer who can bring young people in numbers like that. And if you want to bring young people, that's what you have to do. But, that's always raised the problem of what do you do about the legacy audience? Because the fear in Pacifica, from what I've been told, has always been if we try anything new and different, too new and different, we threaten to lose our legacy audience. And then, what do you do? Number one, what's the purpose of Pacifica? Is it to serve that legacy audience that's been with us forever, or to fire the audience and get a new audience? That's always been an issue at Pacifica. And so in a lot of ways, BAI's programming and Pacifica's programming is the result of an alliance in terms of a balance between change and lack of change, and lack of change is sort of won out. I think everybody would say that for a long time, and the issues behind that are strong. A lot of people want it. I've had people come up to me and say they'd rather have it as a small, poor station that's an outlet for certain political views you don't hear anywhere else than to grow. So if that's what we're talking about, how are we going to keep the station as it is alive, or how we're going to take it out to the max and get a huge audience and make a lot of money, which is quite possible, can be done, if you wanted to do that, is really the issue. Okay, I think that ultimately the most divisive thing is that Pacifica, that's not even the most divisive. The most divisive thing is that who owns the programming? Is Pacifica a regular, normal, like ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, whatever radio station that owns the products that are produced in its studios and broadcast over its air? Or are we like a Lend-Lease type of thing where people pay money to get for their airtime? And again, I think people would love it to be a lease time, and they are forced to serve this legacy audience again, and its beliefs. So again, what do you want to do? What future do we want to have? I think that's why they wrote such a broad, interesting, but still yet broad mission statement, didn't they? Because they knew there would be this kind of problem. So about more specific ideas for what to do. Well, I think it was funny when people talk about cars and people listening to cars, and nobody ever refers to the fact that one of the largest audiences, and those folks are out there, I say hello to them all at the Lighthouse and different places, are unsighted people, or people with limited, or what I don't like to say impaired, but different sighting systems than we have, those who can see. well with both eyes, well enough, at least with my thick glasses, I can. That maybe unsighted people are one of our biggest loyalist audiences, and nobody says anything about that. And I don't mean just putting on another disabled and action type of show, which is a great show, Blue, don't get me wrong, and I've shared a lot of guests with them. But to make the station more itself and its studios more disabled friendly. I never trusted that elevator in the back for a heavy wheelchair. And to do more to involve disabled people at all levels of the programming of the station. And I think there's been a tremendous failure there, and that the BAI's listenership aren't so much radio and cars anymore, but people listening at home, for example, the disabled, people who might actually be going with a communications network on the back of their wheelchairs where they can listen to anything, as well as being at home and places. And again, hello to those folks at the Lighthouse who I know are huge followers. Have we done anything? Have we reached out to the Lighthouse? Have we reached out to disabled people, to the blind, especially, who are huge, maybe one of the largest, most loyal group of listeners to WBAI, who's I haven't heard one word about in the whole in months. I don't think I've ever heard a word about it. All right. That said, what does BAI want to be? I'll leave it at that. I think that you're just gonna, if you want young people, you have to go down the influencer path. You have to bring in people who are bigger than you and make them bigger than you sometimes, your station, your network, and risk peeing off people whose biggest thing is naming names and not being loyal to the POV that they have. So it's up to you what you want to do with it.
All right, thank you, Paul. I think that's a theme. The first part of what you said is a theme for a town hall in and of itself.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's a serious issue to talk about. What are we doing the radio for, and who? All right, let me just bring in Steve Seltzer. Thank you, Paul. Those were very thoughtful comments. Steve.
Okay, guys, I have to go and come back because I have to take care of a problem at the station. We haven't on air listener forum, and then the board app needs the password to get access to the questions they're gonna ask the candidate. So I'll be back.
Okay, thank you, Bertold. Come on, Steve.
So this is Steve Zeltzer from KPFA, and I'm a labor producer, labor journalist, and I'm glad that you're able to have a program, on where you can have the manager participate and answer questions and be questioned and hear from the members of WBAI, because we just had a candidates event yesterday at KPFA, and it wasn't publicized on the website. There were no carts, and that's one of the problems with this election. There is no national publicity. There's no local publicity at the station about who the candidates are. There are no carts for the candidates. So when we talk about democracy, we got to start with our own structure and enforcing our democracy in Pacifica, so people can hear the candidates and different views of what they want Pacifica to be. I think that one of the when we talk about raising money, when people hear something that is important to them and connected to their reality, their struggle, they'll respond financially. And one of the difficulties we've had at Pacifica is that there are groups or people who have authority who don't want to have any kind of national, like town hall meeting on the attack on education, or attack on democracy with what's going on in the South. We have a station in Houston that could cover this. We have journalists who could cover it. We could have a national program, the rise of fascism in this country. This is something Pacifica as a national network can do. Nobody else can do it. And I think that kind of national program with voices from the South and from around the country about what's happening to students who are fighting against the attack on Black history, that would be very powerful as a national program. And frankly, the only national programming are congressional hearings. That's what KPFA management want, and just congressional hearings. I don't agree with that. I think we need to have more national events on Pacifica, on the air, with journalists, with people and the communities, immigration, that can bring in people from around the country. One of the things that people need to know is that one of the ways KPFA won a tremendous audience during the 60s was to broadcast the Sproul Plaza free speech movement live. And that was way before the internet, the web. And yet there's very little live programming of struggles that are going on in the Bay Area. That's something that we have to develop as far as a multimedia platform. And there's students, they're young people who are doing this themselves on Facebook and other social media platforms. So we have to connect with them and get them involved in our programming to contribute. And that means opening up the airwaves. And I think that's something that I and others who are running at KPFA and Rescue Pacifica are concerned about doing, building a multimedia platform, getting young people involved, which are critical. And they have the tools. They are familiar how to use these tools. And we don't have to pay $150,000 to get young people involved in helping to build our stations and Pacifica network, but we have to have a vision and a perspective to do that. And I don't think that is that's one of the obstacles that we face in building up Pacifica. The other thing I wanted to say is participation in Houston, which is very important. There's a large working class, Black, Brown, Asian community there. The programming from those communities have been kept off the air or put on the digital channel. And there was an exclusion of candidates from the station election. This has to be a challenge. We need democracy in our network. We need democracy in our stations. And to limit participation in an election, a lot of people can't use a digital. A lot of seniors, for example, are not familiar how to get on digitally, how to participate digitally. They have problems. There's a digital divide, and these people are being excluded. Seniors are being excluded from the governing of Pacifica and participating in the elections. And that is something that's really not even being addressed at Pacifica and in this election thing. So these issues of democracy and also getting voices out nationally on Pacifica to make it a vibrant national network that can reach millions of people are, I think, what we have to do, and I think we can do, and I think that we can make it the kind of network that it should be.
All right, thank you, Steve. Let me move on to Eleanor. Eleanor.
Hi. I'm trying to turn my camera and everything on so everybody can see me. I have I've had some suggestions that I've made before in other venues, that we go out to demonstrations where people are at who might be become listeners if they knew about the station. And we could have little cheapo radios, maybe that only get WBAI, that we could distribute. And we could ask, not require, ask a contribution of $25, which would make the person a listener member. But the most important idea would be to get these out free to people who don't have radios and who've never listened to the radio because they've never had a radio, and they're not, thinking about radio as something to listen to. Someone, I'm afraid I don't remember who to give the proper credit to, has also suggested that we have a button when somebody is, or some way that when somebody hears something on WBAI that resonates with them, that they can press a button or click a link or whatever to donate $5 or a cup of coffee or whatever to support that particular program at that particular moment when they're enthused about what they're hearing. I'd also like to share a letter from Rachel Barr. She wrote about this town hall, saying that she's a listener elected representative on the WBAI LSB, as am I, by the way. I'm running for re-election. And she says she's been listening to WBAI for 45 years and was a producer back in the day and produced 2 radio programs. She was also a paid staff member and ran the tally room at 120 Wall Street. She associated with the late Alambe Rath, learned how to do radio from Bernard White, Paul Wonder, Chet Jackson, Michael G. Haskins, Reggie Johnson, the late Dred Scott Keys, and many others. She's deeply concerned about the fiscal situation at WBAI, not only as an LSB member, but also as a listener member. She's also deeply concerned about differences in politics of some of the producers at WBAI. She gets more news from Facebook than from WBAI. That's a problem. She mentions that today, which is also David Rothenberg's 90th birthday, there'll be this very Zoom that we're on, regarding the following, that WBAI owes 4 months of back rent to the owner of 388 Atlantic Avenue, where WBAI is located. The owner has rented out several rooms / offices to other entities, as WBAI cannot afford to pay the rent. WBAI is now down to 1 office, the premium room, and the studio. Also, as a result of WBAI not being able to pay the rent at 388, the landlady is not able to make necessary repairs to the building. 2, due to not being able to pay liability insurance, listeners, if they go to the 3rd floor to assist in making phone calls for the station, taking phone pledges, as we are also behind in paying the call center, must sign a waiver stating that if there's an incident, that WBAI is not liable. 3, WBAI is also behind in paying its fee owed to the building where the transmitter is located, which technically means that WBAI can be cut off the air if the transmitter owner decides to do so due to not having received its payment. Or WBAI cannot afford to pay for the premiums that it buys in order to sell to the listeners to increase income. That's a catch-22 and an oxymoron. She says it's her thinking that the general manager must reach out to the listeners, as this is a listener-sponsored radio station, so that we can all rally together in order to raise money by any means necessary, as was done back in the day. It's going to take everyone, the general manager, program director, the LSB, the producers, the paid and unpaid staff, unpaid and paid producers, though she believes that no producers and their assistants should be paid. And I can agree with that too. We have plenty of people who can provide excellent programs unpaid. So we shouldn't be paid through the nose for certain people. It's going to take all of these people and the listeners to rally and keep WBAI on the air. So I wanted to share that letter since Rachel is not able to be here at the moment.
All right, thank you, Eleanor. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Okay.
My hand has been raised for half an hour.
Hold on, please. We're taking people in order, and the next person is Camilla. Go on, Camilla.
Yeah, hi. To follow up on David Saltman's fundraising idea, I just want to mention that I was involved many years ago with a nonprofit in California that they did an online auction, and in 2 weeks' time of the auction part of it, of course, there's the preparation time, but in 2 weeks' time, they raised $200,000. And now online auctions there are all kinds of companies that do this. They used a company called Auction Frogs. And they were low price items like, a lunch with a famous author or a book to, somebody's condo in Colorado, or a fishing trip somewhere. The thing is that there are all these people, they may not be inclined to make donations necessarily, but they have underutilized assets. They have excess nice things, places, homes, And those people are so easy to inspire to get to them to donate to something like this. And you've got the audiences, and I think this should be like a national thing where all of the auction is done nationally, drawing on people's contacts in all the locations, and the audiences in all the locations. And I mean, they raised $200,000. There were in 2 weeks, there were about 75 items in the auction when it started. And then there were about another 10 that were sort of surprise additional items that were added to it as the 2 weeks went on. So 85 items. It was really simple to do with auction frogs. And I think it's a quick and easy way to mobilize some cash that you could do on an ongoing basis as well.
Wow.
You do a quarterly auction, promote them on the air.
Another great idea. Bertold, you want to comment on?
Yes, I'm back. Well, when we had a development director, the first year auction we did, I mean, I don't know exactly what you think of auction and how that went, but we had a curator. It was an art auction. We believed in quality and stuff like that. Maybe it can be a general auction. We had a curator that we paid to manage the auction. I mean, there's a lot of marketing and advertising that's done to the art world or different websites. And then we had a gallery that gave us Koshner gallery that gave us their gallery for one night or 2 nights in 23rd Street, Tribeca, and we had a live auction, and then we took it on the internet. I mean, that lasted online. That lasted about a month. I mean, it took us like 6 months to organize, to prepare, with the curator putting a lot of work, and then we made about $60,000 to $75,000. And then the curator kind of, so how much money we made, he increased his price. We got upset. We fired him because he was also a friend of our development director. She felt betrayed. And then we thought we could have done it ourselves, and we didn't do that well. I think we made $7,000 the second one we did. So I don't know exactly who did those auctions, but if someone is knowledgeable with auctions and things like that, we have an auction website, and then we also have a board member, Rachel Barr, who wanted to do an auction, but I felt that her auction was like all over the place. She had those quality items that she wanted from us, and she wanted to go on the air and advertise and ask people to send stuff in, and I didn't think that was the way to go. I put it in touch with our curator, and then it's sitting there right now. I believe she did get a website, an art auction website that I need to vet. I need to get the curator to vet. And yes, that would be great, because we are paying storage right now for a whole bunch of those art pieces that didn't sell. Some of them are pretty good pieces that, talking to the curator 2 months ago, he was telling me he doesn't understand how come those specific pieces didn't go. So yeah, that is a very welcome idea. People think that I was against auction. I wasn't against an auction. I just wanted to make sure that it's done tastefully, it's done well, and then with a well put plan, written plan,
So if I could just say that while art is great, and it's great, I think that there should be more diverse portfolio of things that people value. Like, how about just a massage where they make a donation to WBAI and they bid on something where they get a massage, or they get a lunch with somebody interesting, or they get a weekend house. It's things that people wouldn't normally wouldn't normally buy, but let's say people go on vacations with their family. Well, if there's a vacation house that they could bid on and get a tax deduction and try a new place, I think more diversity is better. I think you get more people interested than just art. Art's great, but I would just recommend it be more mixed.
So we're talking about a general auction.
Yeah, I mean, a condo in LA for a week or an apartment in New York for a week, you could really have some fun, like mixing up the assets from, all the different station locations, a trip to Houston. It would just need some brainstorming, but it's so easy to do on Auction Frogs. That's the one I'm familiar with.
Okay.
Well, let's.
So I'm glad you commented on this, because I will try to open my mind to that idea and concept. And if you know how this was planned and organized, and how did they get the different pieces, or did they have a different section on the auction website?
Well, why don't we put you both together, Bertold? We'll put Camilla and you together. You guys can talk about this, okay?
That sounds good.
Let's do
I
that.
can tell you more.
All right. Now, call-in user. Thank you, Camilla. Now, call-in user 3. I apologize, Andrew. Call-in user 3 said they've been waiting a half hour. I know you've been waiting too, Andrew. But let me just bring in call-in user 3. Could you unmute call-in user 3? Yeah, go on.
Hello. Actually, it's been holding more than an hour, but that's okay. Thank you for having me on. My name's Bernie. I've been a longtime listener and donor to WBAI Pacifica, and I have a suggestion to get more people to listen or be interested into the radio station that would cost nothing, and that is about 4 years ago in 2019, I donated what's called an RDBS encoder. It cost about $2,000. I donated it. Mo came up from DC and installed it at the transmitter site. And the advantage of this thing is it sends out to like virtually all car radios made in the last 15 years or more, display the call letters and any other data that's sent over an RDBS encoder, such as the name of the program you're listening to, or the phone number of the station. And a lot of the newer cars have a radio that will display a little still graphic image, like an album cover or somebody's face or something. And this would be displayed in every radio. You have the hardware already at the studio. It's disconnected. Berthold oversaw its disconnection back in 2019, and now they just have it, the transmitter RDBS feed, which is just the call letters only, nothing else. If you turn to any other radio station in your market, you will see not only call letters, but the name of the program that you're listening to. Why doesn't WBAI do this? It's just stupid. They're not doing it. And it was working. It was working great. And then Berthold had it disconnected. It's still at the studio. I can send you a picture of it in the equipment rack at the transmitter site. Even has my name on it, donated by Bernie, WBAI Pacifica. What is wrong with these people? What's wrong with Berthold? What is wrong with this man? Why are you still hiring this guy? He is completely incompetent.
All right. Enough of that. Okay. Thank you, Bernie.
Enough of what? Enough of Berthold is really what should be.
Well, Berthold, Bernie, we're not here to engage in personal attacks on anybody. Okay. But I hear you.
All right. I was just stating a fact. I'm sorry.
Well, you're stating your opinion. Thank you.
Do you think Berthold is competent to run the station?
Bernie, do you want me to, I'll silence you and
okay. Okay. Please address my suggestion and question.
That's a good suggestion, Bernie. I didn't realize that there was that equipment there. Berthold, do you want to say anything about this equipment?
I mean, that's obviously, why would I have this? You said that I oversaw the removal of this equipment. I do not make equipment decisions. I do not make technical decisions as such. I have Jake Glantz and Grayson Challenger, who manages the station. The whole idea of this guy talking about me overseeing the removal of this. Why would I do that? Why? I mean, I don't even remember what this guy is talking about at all. Don't remember this conversation at all. So unless you have Grayson Challenger and Jake Glantz in this conversation to say what they did, why they did, and what was the circumstances, this is all just, talk.
Berthold, am I mistaken? Or Berthold, are you the general manager of WBAI?
Bernie.
Do you oversee all the operations of WBAI? I thought that was your job.
All right, Bernie, I'm glad you brought this incidence of this. I never heard about this equipment, and you're right. Who the hell would not want something like this installed and working? I mean, please, it's ridiculous. I mean,
I can tell you the circumstances. I can tell you the circumstances of its disconnection. When after the situation with the big layoff in 2019, and to keep the radio station on the air and not losing the license, there was a streamed programming from the West Coast temporarily. But then after that was shut down after a month or so, and WBA went back to local programming, then that equipment was disconnected. And during that whole period, when it was like Pacifica across America, whatever it was transmitting not only the call letters, but the name of the program that was being broadcast at that moment. All the other stations in your market, or most of them, FM stations, do this, except WBAI. There's in the largest radio market in the United States, the New York metropolitan area, there's a lot of cars with these radios in them.
Jim, may I be recognized? This is Jack.
Hold tight. Go on. Just hold on. Let Bernie finish his comment, Jack. Go on, Bernie.
I was just saying that there are more vehicles with car radios that can receive WBAI and this RDBS stream showing the call letters and the name of the station, and even a photo of, I don't know, maybe you could put a picture of Berthold's face on the radio. That'll bring in some people. Anyway, and it's the biggest market in the country. And it's one of the only stations in this market that doesn't have a decent RDBS encoder hooked up. It's sitting in the rack. I can email you a picture of it sitting in the rack that has my name on it, donated by me 4 years ago. It was disconnected in 2019. And I don't know, I thought Berthold was the general manager and he oversaw everything.
Gotcha. All right, here. So thank you. I'm glad you brought this up to us.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, hold tight,
I think
Jack.
it's a relevant point.
It is
What
irrelevant.
Bernie is saying.
Yeah.
I get it in my car. He's talking about Peace and Justice Radio, WBAI 99.5 FM. It pops right up in the graphic. Bernie, I think you're mistaken that it hasn't been disconnected. It might have been disconnected 5 years ago when it was PA.
Well, maybe it was, you know what? If it's showing that now, then it was reconnected.
Okay.
And I'm sorry. I live in Philadelphia. Right. I live in Philadelphia, so I listen to it online.
Yeah,
but
well,
I know, a few years ago, somebody sent a picture. Go ahead.
All right.
Okay, this is good.
All right. Well,
but does it show? Listen to me. Does it show the name of the program that is being broadcast at that time, or is it just keep saying it's just an endless loop of Peace and Justice Radio 24/7?
It has the specifics of the show. It tells me what I'm listening to, when I'm listening to it. Somewhat different than the other radio stations that also come up with the graphic information. It doesn't tell me what song is being played, unfortunately. But then again, sometimes they play such eclectic music that it's hard to get that information all the time. And in fact, I focus on these little details. You're absolutely right, Bernie. It's a very important advertising tool, specific tool, get people to identify the tool. And thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that that was what it was. And thank you, Bernie, for giving it to the radio station.
Right. And if it's an eclectic program, it could be set up with an application on a computer in the studio. You just whoever's producing a show, they could just type in the name of what's being broadcast. It's only a few keystrokes, but it requires a little bit of effort.
Bernie, why email me and we'll get Berthold in the loop. Let's try to solve this problem. Thank you for bringing it up. Thank you.
What, Mr. Dingman, I should send it to you?
Yeah, send me it and I'll send it to Berthold. And I think that you raise a brilliant point and it's worth, trying to solve this problem. Thanks a lot, Bernie.
I'm sorry if I sounded frustrated, but I'm frustrated that WBAI is, 6 months in arrears and paying its transmitter and rent fees.
There are many that people are frustrated about. We're trying to solve the problems. I understand it. I could sit there for 30 minutes and have a recitation about the problems. I'm not doing that today. I'm trying to figure out how to. But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Now, Andrew, you've been waiting very patiently. Andrew, thank you. Go on, Andrew.
Thank you, Jim. I apologize for my voice. Hope you can hear me okay. I want to talk about underwriting. Is that appropriate right now?
Sure, of course. You can
All
talk
right.
what you want to talk about.
Before I do that, and thank you for organizing this, Jim, and everybody participating. Before I do that, I want to quickly comment on the last caller and everybody in Pacifica regarding respecting each other in our discussions. I think we can be critical of people's actions without being critical of individuals personally, which is a personal attack by not calling them names and labeling them. However, it is just fine to be critical of their actions. Please separate the two and do not make it personal. As Martin Luther King says, we can respect the sinner while being critical of the sin. Please, let's be respectful of each other as individuals. We're all here for Pacifica. All right, moving on. Regarding underwriting, first of all, I am with KPFK in Los Angeles. I'm a listener member only. I have no position. I'm also the director of Friends of Pacifica and Pacifica Listener Forum, which are independent organizations. That is separate from the discussion of underwriting, but I serve in that position as well, serving Pacifica. Now, regarding underwriting at KPFK, we have been doing underwriting for a while. However, we are all only doing it with what are called cultural and arts organizations, such as theaters, theater groups, musical venues. However, I feel there is great potential. I've discussed this with Jim. There is great potential in expanding this to the local business community. Now, I want to really be clear, we're not talking about large corporations such as ExxonMobil or Lockheed Martin, et cetera, or Monsanto. These are small mom and pop businesses, or even they don't even have to be mom and pop, but however, small local businesses that would not be able to exercise undue influence on our programming. The donations in the form of monthly underwriting, and it would be monthly, would be limited in amount. Okay, Jim, please just stop me if I'm talking too much. I have a lot to say. Now, it would be small donations. It would be the crowdfunding model used by Bernie Sanders, et cetera, so that each donor would not have undue influence. If one donor, say a restaurant, et cetera, was donating $100 a month or even $1,000 a month, and they said, I don't like your programming, you must change it or I will stop my donation, we will say, fine, thank you, we don't need your $1,000, have a nice day, because we have another 1,000 folks, businesses donating $1,000, and that is how we meet our budget. All right, so at $100 a month, 1,000 businesses would meet the full budget of KPFK. $200 a month, 500 businesses, $1,000 a month, 100 businesses. Are you getting the idea? In Los Angeles, there must be 500 businesses we can find to donate $200, and in the millions, literally millions of local businesses in our listening area, from Santa Barbara to LA to San Diego to Riverside, et cetera. Now, I've taken, in coordination with our interim general manager, Michael Novick, who I think is doing an awesome job, I've started a task force to work on this with a group of people, including our chief engineer at KPFK, what I recognize is our legitimate LSB chairperson, whatever you think about that. However, it is our one of our LSB folks, and then we have two other people on our LSB, and then another listener member, longtime listener member like myself. Now, what I want to say about underwriting is the reason I think this is such a good idea is while all the other fundraising ideas are fine and good, they take all this work to do, such as premiums, such as logistics, such as finding the premiums, et cetera, sending the premiums, and then we don't even get all the money. with underwriting, a business gets something in return. For $100 a month or $1,000 a month, they get their businesses announced on our air. It is not an ad. It is not advertising. They only get it listed. It's strictly regulated by the FCC and by the Pacifica National Board about what could be said and who can do this. It cannot be from any business that is against our mission statement. For instance, any business that supports the weapons industry, that discriminates against women's right to choose, the LGBT community, excuse me for that, the immigrant community, any business tied to Wall Street, tied to that is disrespectful of workers, that is disrespectful of the environment, et cetera, et cetera. It's very strict. Also, the FCC is very strict about what could be listed. It could only list the name of the business, their location, the product or service that they offer, and their contact information. That's it, folks. It cannot say we are the best in the world or come by and visit us and we will give you a discount, etc. It's very strict and it can only be 15 seconds or 30 seconds long. So think about how many we could list between programs and raise all of our funding and beyond. And what would that do for us? Okay, this is very important. The reason we say to the listener members, we are supported by you, and that is so important. Why do we say that? We say that for two reasons. Number one, what differs us from the other public TV stations and radio stations and makes us totally unique is that we are self-governed. Our members elect our governing body, our board of directors, our LSBs who choose our board of directors, our PNB. None of these other stations offer that to our members. We do not stress that. However, all we are stressing is that what they get in return for their $25 or $200 is a product. We are not stressing the most important thing is that what they get is that they get to become a member and run for election in our governance or vote for the people who govern us. That is unique and that is the most important thing. And we are sidetracking that most important thing by focusing on all these products. Okay, I think that needs to be reversed. Second most important thing about this, we say we are not corporate sponsored, meaning we don't take money such as NPR takes from Monsanto, from Arthur Daniel Midland or whoever they're called, Big Agriculture, from ExxonMobil, etc. We take our funding from our listeners so we don't have to take funding from the big corporations. Now listen to this. If we take funding from local businesses, it still has the same effect. It allows us to avoid taking funding from large corporations. We do not have to rely on the listeners to do that. We can rely on the local businesses who need us to promote them. They cannot afford to pay $10,000 or whatever it costs to get listed on NPR or in a newspaper or forget about it on TV. It costs many thousands of dollars. For $100, they can get listed one time a month on our station. For $1,000, they can be listed every day of the week on our station. They can't get that anywhere else, folks. And we're not making use of this incredible resource we have. And they have budgets for this. They will pay for this. The listeners do not have budgets to donate to us. They do, many of them, and we will still accept their donations to supplement what the business community will be giving us to fund us. We will not turn that down and we will welcome it, but we should not be relying on this. This is ridiculous, folks, if you ask me. It will also eliminate fund drives. It's fund drives that are killing us. It's substituting programming for fund drives, for sales pitches. It's turning our programmers into salespeople. It'll eliminate all of this, folks, because all we have to do is get on the phone, call our local businesses, and let them know what we're offering them, our airwaves, to announce their business. It'll get them new customers, and we don't have to have fund drives. None, nil, zilch, gone. Okay, we can turn them into membership drives now. Remember, we want to try and solicit members, not funders from our listeners. Okay, and we can still do short membership drives. We can still put pitches in here and there for membership drives, but we won't be relying on them. We just need our members, folks, to become members so we have enough. It takes a minimal amount to become our self-governing body, which is folks to run on our LSBs and folks to vote. Okay. Lastly, it'll eliminate all this work on premiums that our membership department has having to do. It'll eliminate all of this stuff with all these products, all these premiums. All of this is ridiculous, if you ask me. Now, it's fine if folks want to still do that. All right. But let's stop relying on doing all this stuff and switch to the business community who need our support and who will have zero say in our programming. I think I've said enough. Thank you.
All right. And what I did put up here, this is the motion that was passed by the board and what Andrew was referring to. And as you can see, we have in it that we are not going to enter in agreements with entities that are anti-labor, anti-environment, have support for fossil fuels, supports Wall Street, supports nuclear technology, supports big tech's invasion of our privacy, promotes racism, sexism, militarism, nationalism, xenophobia, or supports the aboriginal rights of women to control their own bodies or the rights of the LGBTQ community for full equality or the rights of immigrants. I might add that a couple of years ago, and Bertel remembers this story, we had a person who was listening to WBAI on Martin Luther King Day, who either was at Solomon Brothers or Morgan Stanley, I forget which one. Bertold can, when he comes up, can bring that up again. And the gentleman wanted to donate his bonus to WBAI. And
Goldman Sachs.
And the whole thing got
Sachs.
Sachs. Okay, Goldman Sachs. And the whole thing got screwed up because, people, oh my God, we're going to take money from Goldman Sachs and they're going to, and it raises a whole other series of questions about how we deal with donations from wealthy people. Because I've actually listened to people on the different factions of the boards around the country, and I remember once it also, well, where can we find somebody to give us $1 million? And I'm saying to myself, well, who the hell's going to give us $1 million and not want to do it with some influence in mind or not? You never know. There could be somebody totally altruistic. But anyway, I just throw that out because that's the reality of the financing situation. Now, Eleanor, you had another comment?
Yes,
Jim,
I do.
Jim, this is Andrew. Can I say one more thing?
I need to leave soon.
Yeah, hold on, Eleanor. Go on. What?
I need to leave soon.
Go on.
I just wanted to say that people who have feedback, good or bad, about the general manager or a program director should contact me as a member of the Management Evaluation Committee at EEF, like my initials, at EEFWWW@yahoo.com. That's EEFWWW@yahoo.com with your subject line in all capital letters, so it will stand out in the morass that is my inbox. So that's the correct way to go about things instead of making comments on this Zoom call. Just contact me at EEFWWW@yahoo.com. And I need to go now.
All right. Thank you, Eleanor. Yes, go ahead, Andrew.
Two things. If people want to discuss what's going on with underwriting, with what we're doing at KPFK or in general at Pacifica, and by the way, it is being done now at KPFT in Houston, and as far as I'm aware, at WBAI in New York underwriting as well. Two ways they can discuss this with myself and with others who are doing this. Number one, as the coordinator of the task force we're doing at KPFK, I'm going to organize meetings where and open it up to other folks around the network who would like to discuss this with us, good or bad, suggestions and how you may do this at your station or what we may do at our station, KPFK, both good or bad, etc. And I'll give you my contact. Another way I'm going to organize, we are meeting weekly, our task force. I'm going to initiate a second weekly meeting to open it up to other folks who would like to join in this discussion. I think it has great potential. Secondly, as the director of Friends of Pacifica, we are now doing weekly chat rooms which have open discussions about any topics. People are free to join us and encouraged to join us to discuss this topic, underwriting, or anything else regarding Pacifica. It happens every Friday right now. It's been happening every Friday for the past 2 or 3 months and will continue. I am coordinating it through Friends of Pacifica, the organization I direct. That's happening Fridays from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. And the best, easiest way to contact me for either of these groups would be the following email. It would be friendsofpacifica@gmail.com. Once again, friendsofpacifica@gmail.com. And for full disclosure, we do have a board of advisors for this organization. Jim Digman is on our board of advisor, as well as our executive director, Stephanie Wells. And we also have our chief engineer at KPFK, Stuart Landau. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Jim.
All right, and you can, Andrew, you can put that information in the chat here if you want. Now, is there anybody who hasn't asked or commented so far who wants to get their last?
I have a question for Andrew.
Okay, go on, Bertold.
A quick question, Andrew. So this task force about underwriting and stuff like that. So I'm assuming, I'm just asking, but assuming that you are developing a framework, a structure, so that any Pacifica, KPFK specifically, but any Pacifica station can kind of piggyback off that framework, so that we can have a step-by-step outreach to underwriting, identifying underwriters and stuff like that. Because this is underwriting is one of the committees where we call it task force that we are creating with the board. And if we need to merge them together, so that we can be more efficient and get a good document together, and so we reach out to our people in New York, and you reach out to your people in KPFK. That would be good. Second, I reach out to my engineers, and so they are going to give me a comprehensive report on this, and then I will on this so-called burning thing. And then I will give that report to you. But for the record, Bernie and I have been clashing for a long time. And then so he was even discarded by the people in his own group, the hackers. They kicked him out because they had issues with him. So since he attacked me directly, I felt that it was important for everybody here who do not know me or do not know him to have that in context. And if they want, Jim, you can give them access to information and to people from the hackers group so that they can ask them questions themselves without having me as a third party.
Right. No, I'm sorry that happened. And Bernie sort of calmed down after you left, Bertold. But yeah, and that quote that you made of Martin Luther King, Andrew, was very good. If you could put that in the chat, I'd like to use that again, because that was a very good quote about how to deal with that kind of problem. Because of course, pardon me?
Can I respond to Bertold? And
yeah,
I'll let you.
Let me just say that, I have a bigger mouth than Bernie and Bertold combined. So I always want to keep my mouth under control in these situations, because it'd be totally counterproductive for people to just go off and start, emoting. But anyway, go on, Andrew.
To respond to what you just said, Jim. Yeah, if once again, we can be critical of people's actions, But, you know, if we just limit it to that and not get personal and label them or talk about them personally, it enables them to respond to it. Once we get personal, then they need to defend themselves because no one can be labeled anything. Everybody changes. Nobody is this or that. That is stuck. Everybody does change, and our actions, and we don't know their intentions, but we do know what their actions are. So let's please just focus on that. Now, in response to Bertol, thank you, Bertol. I totally agree with you. My intention in starting this task force is KPFK. Besides most importantly for myself and us at KPFK is our own survival. However, we are a network. We are all in this together. And another intention is to do this as a model for other stations to replicate or duplicate. I did in our first meeting for the task force, the underwriting task force, which once again I coordinate. I did invite the general manager at KPFT who did attend, Sandy Wyman. And we also had Michael Novick, once again, who is working directly with us on this, or we are working directly with him, of course. And I also think I sent you an invitation also, Bertold. I'm pretty sure I think I did. However, whether or not I did, I will keep you informed. And I agree, we ought to make this a template that other stations can duplicate. And that is once again why I am starting weekly meetings that we can invite in folks like yourself or anyone else who would like to discuss that with us and see how we can all share our ideas and benefit from this and work together on this at each station and as our network and learn from each other and get input from you folks for what we're doing at KPFK. Personally, I think this can replace all of our funding once again, and then we don't have to do any more fund drives or premiums. We can still do that if we want. However, we won't need to rely on that, and that'll change everything. I forgot to say one more thing, if I may say, Jim. Once we do this, programmers will no longer be required to fund their own program in the way of their listeners, which is what's going on right now. I think that's ridiculous. If a programmer has a program that is appropriate for the listeners, has relevance, and they have listeners, it doesn't matter what their listeners pay. Their listeners should not have to pay to keep them on the air. I consider that pay to play. If we're getting funding, separating it from the programmers and the listeners and relying on the local business community, no longer this whole discussion about programming and whether or not a program needs to justify being on the air, that all goes out the door. We don't need to worry about that anymore. We can focus on the programming, not on the money being raised by the listeners. Are you understanding this, folks, how that'll change everything at Pacifica and allow us to rely on our mission statement and not being a home shopping network? Once again, this can change everything and serve our local business community. They are part of our communities, our local business community. Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you. Just hold tight, Bert. Hazel, go on, Hazel. Unmute, please.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Thanks for this program. And thanks to all the listeners and participants that are out there. There's so much important information that's been shared, and it just shows how many people are still rooting and care about BAI. And it's such a good way to communicate with like-minded people. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Jim.
All right, thank you. Michael, as we I'll turn to Bertold in a second. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask or add before we close out? Going once, going twice. All right. On that note, Michael, do you want to make some final comments before I let Bertold end it all? Go on, Michael.
Why don't we just let people know that there is a candidates forum going to be on the air for the WBAI election to the local station board, and that's going to be broadcast on live on the air at WBAI at 4 p.m. So it's going to be, this is a busy day for a lot of people.
All right. And someone is making a comment about the insurance issue. Yes, the insurance issue is high on my priorities to get that problem solved. Anyway, Bertold, you want to make some last comments and then we'll sort of end it. And I want to thank everybody for participating. It's important to hone in on these issues. Again, we have the loft committee there in motion doing things. We set up these task forces. It's great to have Andrew talk about let's cooperate back and forth throughout the country on how to actually implement underwriting in practice. But go on, Bertold, you have the last word here.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for, really being willing and so excited and trying to bring in some ideas to sit in the network. Hazel Pender, who just spoke, thank you very much for volunteering. She will be making phone calls to lab donors and people who haven't pledged and did not pay. Hazel is a very strong supporter of the station. We talk on a regular basis and so on. Thank you very much. I also wanted to point out that Paul DeRienzo made some very good comment. Unfortunately, at that time, I had to go into station mode to solve an issue. These comments are extremely important. I mean, Paul and I, we have some issues with each other, but as far as these ideas, I think they are great ideas. We need to determine and define who we are, what we want to do, and where we want to go. Obviously, I just found out a friend of mine died 6 months ago, somebody about my age, and then it's like they're dying like flies around me. So we are going. So if we just want to do this for our group of people that are dying, and then there's not going to be anyone left. So I feel that we need to pass the baton to the next generation, no matter how they carry this tradition, which is a great tradition of Pacifica, whether it's through radio, through podcast, whatever they do. We want to pass on the baton that what we were doing to continue to do it. And lastly, I just want to remind everybody that sometimes we talk about all this strategic plan and all of these things, all this complicated stuff. You can have all the details. I'm a detail guy, spreadsheet and all that stuff. But the bottom line is this: WBAI need to focus on getting PSAs up to $300,000 a year. We were able to get 80,000 without really knowing what we're doing, Linda and I. We were winging it, so we can't get 300,000. We're only dealing with two vendors, really: the New York City Department of Health and New York City Department of Transportation. So we definitely can get that. We can get and talk to the Department of the Age, Department of Minority Affairs, focusing on minority women having a high debt, birth debt. The second thing is premium at WBAI. If we really come up with 2 brand new premium a month, we can generate $240,000 a year, another $20,000 a month. So that is right there, $540,000 generated for WBAI. We're not even talking about anything else. That would be more than enough. Our deficit right now is 200 and something. So sometimes it's very simple. I hope that I think Adrian, somebody earlier was pushing, was asking me questions about the podcast and stuff like that. Thank you for, putting me to the fire. I just want to point out fingers. I think it's a collective thing that all of us, we have to focus on because we kind of sometimes are paralyzed in talking and not doing. Somebody in charge just needs to say, okay, let's do this, and then let's do it. So that's $300 and something thousand that WBAI can generate with just these 2 committees. It's a sample. Andrew was talking about the whole PSA things, and we do have the Harlem Chamber of Commerce, which promotes minority business in Harlem.
that we are partnered with, and then we bring small organizations on the air regularly talking about what's happening in Harlem, and then the idea is to try to get those people to support WBAI. You know, we don't want it to be a pay to play. We are interviewing them on the air anyways, and then they donate what they can to support the station, encouraged by the Harlem Chamber of Commerce. So, Andrew, yes, we do have some of these ideas that we need to do, but finally, it's easier than we think. We just don't have enough resources. All of those ideas are great ideas. If I focus on one of them and do not do anything else, it will be done. It will be done well. So, you know, I always say, if you have an idea, run with it. We'll support you, but do not count on us to do the legwork. We will support you. We'll give you whatever expertise we can have and access, but we cannot manage it. But we welcome it, and then we'll give you the authority with anybody involved and then the listeners to represent the station, somewhat supervised by us. And so that's all I have to say. You know, the art auction is welcome. The different venues to go to have a retreat, or to have a boat ride, all of that is welcome. If we have that musically set up, and I do believe that you should get more than one person to manage this, because I can tell you it's a lot of work, you know, just from experience, and then you will burn out. So we need 2-3 people running these initiatives, and management will collaborate. We used to have a development director who used to step in and help. That doesn't exist anymore. So, but thank you very much all for listening to all my yapping, and hopefully we'll continue this discussion. And then next time we talk, hopefully I will let you know about how the task force are doing as far as generating premium and getting PSAs, or at least a list of people we can reach out to get PSAs in the next coming 12 months.
All right. And I will say that as the chair of the Pacifica National Strategic Planning Committee, we're going to throw a strategic plan out so everybody can beat up on us pretty soon. And one of the things it's going to talk about is the need to raise the amount of people listening to each station by several times at the very least. This situation that we're constantly in precarity, because I see all the chat, you know, the back and forth on the chat, and part of it's due in part to this constant situation of precarity and the anger and bitterness that results in it, which I totally understand. We're trying to talk about how to fight out of it. I would say in the short term, we need to get our audience up to 150,000 to 200,000 a week. That's a lot of work. And in the long term, we have to get up to 500,000 a week. And that's at every station and every market. Then we would not be having these internecine fights and battles. But that means we have to confront some issues that some of us don't like to confront. And that is, why have the amount of listener members dropped 70% since 2004? And, you know, that famous cartoon, we've met the enemy and it is us. And I think that there's a little bit of that in there. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for showing up. It was, I think, productive, and it was important to share all these opinions. As people know, when we do these town halls here, we try not to interfere with people. Let them say, except, you know, people want to start getting nasty and stuff, I'm going to have to shut that down. But, you know, we want to have people express themselves, and hopefully we're going to have 2 more going up in the next couple of weeks. We may devote one to the candidates in New York. I'm not sure what we're going to do, but we may do that. And yep, lack of funds are doing us in. You're damn right. And that's the thing we want to change. And at this point in time in our history as a country, the amount of issues that are coming up, I mean, I just have to point out the circus we may or may not have down in Atlanta, Georgia, with the 4th Indictment. Pacifica has the ability to transform itself in a heartbeat. And I am not, as a board member, committed to see any signals sold or swapped. I want to see them work better. And better means reaching out to the millions of people in their signal areas. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we can all work together and get these problems solved and look back on this as simply a bad aspect of our history as a foundation that we can laugh at in retrospect. Thank you so much.